Welcome everyone. Loving seeing your names pop up there. It's cool to see people from all over the world. Um, we'll get started in just a sec. But for those who don't know, I'm Brendan Spiegel. I'm the co-founder of Narratively and the director of our Narratively Academy. Loving seeing people chime in. Hi from Charlottesville, all around the world. This is a very special live Narratively Academy seminar. We have a really special guest today. I'm really excited to have Stephen Beschloss. He's a man of many hats. For those of you who know him or don't, he's a Pulitzer Prize nominated journalist. He's written for the New York Times, New Yorker, Washington Post, everywhere. He teaches journalism at NYU Journalism School and narrative writing there. He's an author, filmmaker. You've probably seen him on MSNBC or Fox Business or NPR. But more recently and more relevant to today's conversation, he's a Substacker. In 2021, Stephen launched America, America, where he writes about everything going on in our politics and our cultural conversations. You guys
Right.
know. And I think you've got like what 100,000 almost. You're knocking
Yeah.
on
Right.
100,000 subscribers, right?
I'm literally at like 99,000 right now, and so I'm sort of watching those numbers go till I hit 100K and up. So
All
I mean,
right.
and,
If you don't subscribe to Steven, subscribe now. Let's try to hit 100 before the end of this
thank
call,
you.
so he can owe us.
Indeed, I
And
will owe
we'll
you.
yeah, free subscriptions, paid subscriptions if you like, to both America, America, Stephen's publication, and Narratively, which is ours. We're both on Substack.
Yeah,
Um,
and for my subscribers, please do check out Narratively. It's jammed full of fantastic writing and both good writers and smart people who are running it. So and contributing, like Brendan and other people who are part of Narratively. So do check them out if you haven't yet.
Thank you for those kind words. I had not
Yeah,
asked Stephen to say that. I'm loving seeing the comments and couldn't click on a link faster, and new people signing up. For me, I had reached out to Stephen a couple of weeks ago about this because I know it's been a really difficult time for a lot of people. As I talk to writers, as I talk to students in our classes, I just hear a lot of like, what do I do with my energy, my lack of energy, my anger, my hopelessness? I should note it narratively, we're not explicitly a partisan publication. I think there's people with, all over the world, all across the political spectrum. I hope there's a diversity of thought here. Probably not everyone here agrees with me and Stephen on every issue, but I think everyone's angry about something in the world right now. But I also think it's a time where this ebbs and flows a little bit, but there's like a lack of hope in some cases. I
yeah,
know, like in the fall, I was talking to my colleague Noah at Narratively, and I was saying, I don't know if I want to stay engaged in politics. Like, I don't know if I have any more to give. I don't know if I can change things. All it does is destroy my mental health. And he was like,
yeah,
wow, like you're someone who's been engaged in politics your whole life. That says a lot. But I heard a lot of people say that. A lot of people are feeling like, why stay engaged? I can't make a difference. All it
yeah.
does is just, run me down. That's a big question, Stephen. But like, if people read the stories that we shared in the announcement for this class with the reader site, they know like you are you're a person who stays engaged every day,
Sure.
week in, week out. Why and how the hell do you do
Yeah. Yeah.
that?
Well, it's a lot. I mean, look, I've been doing it for 4 years, and we can kind of go back into the kind of the origins of that and kind of how it's evolved. But in terms of this moment, I mean, I don't want to sound pretentious about it, but I feel like it's a duty to my country. I feel like it's a service that I can do to try to make sense at a time when things don't make sense, right? To try to do what I can to help people to remember what's right and wrong, what's true and what's false, and what's normal and what's absolutely crazy. And so I think if I just think about from the moment of the election on November 5th, and kind of the distress that so many people were feeling, and I did hear a lot of people saying, what you're saying, like, gosh, I don't really know whether I want to stay engaged. This is just too much. It's too heartbreaking. It's too difficult. It's too depressing, and so on. And I understand it, but I'm advocating that people do need to stay engaged. That the Trump regime benefits if people feel despair and feel discouraged and feel that there's nothing that they can do. And look, the resistance campaigns that have taken a lot of different forms, including the protests with millions on Saturday this weekend, is a sign that there is a lot of pent up anger and frustration and desire to do something. And so for me, almost just at a writer's level, every time I write, I'm thinking like, is this going to be finally the time I'm going to nail it? This is the time I'm finally going to do the perfect piece, right? And of course, the perfect piece is always somewhere out there that you never quite get to. But I focus on really since the beginning on this combination of what I call sort of hope and alarm, and that means trying to be as sober and as clear and as vivid and as accurate and as truthful and honest and transparent, and using language that's lies are lies, and fascism is fascism, and saying things that are criminals are criminals, and say these things. Don't soft pedal, don't soften it, don't find ways to sort of work your way around it. Try to be as direct as I can, on the one hand, right? So what's happening, what's true, but also trying to tap into what I think people are feeling. And if I feel like people are especially despairing on a given day or a given week, I try to think through what's the other way to look at this, right? What are the
Mm,
ways to understand that, as horrible as a particular day or week or moment may be, that's not the end of the story. So, what's the underlying things that may let us think differently about it? What is it? What are we fighting against? But also, what are we fighting for? And by thinking
yeah.
about what we're fighting for, that also helps me to look forward. So I don't get always sort of trapped in the moment. I try to look back in time, and I try to look forward in time. And that goes a long way to giving me the ability to I hope share something that's both, truthful about the moment, but also a larger frame that helps people to manage.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about not chasing the perfect piece, but not getting caught up in that. And I think I saw someone dropped in the comments, I didn't catch their name, but said even writing a Substack comment helps. Every little thing
Mm,
helps. Like sometimes just like writing a comment, maybe you turn that into a bigger piece later. It's just like,
it does.
a tiny thing helps.
And,
I'm gonna
and,
jump.
and
Yeah,
can I say, I mean, I think there's a larger conversation for us to have about the role of social media, and that precedes my work here, but it continues now, and I find sometimes having 300 characters on Blue Sky or something that I do on Notes, and I build really hundreds of thousands of followers on Blue Sky, and at this point about 100,000 followers on Notes for Substack. And the thing is, it provides both the opportunity to do something in a short form. I mean, to write a few sentences and see how it engages with people. And so I don't want to say every time I do it I'm crowdsourcing, but to some extent I'm blowing off steam, and I'm also taking a moment to sort of see what's on people's minds. And so it that
yeah,
also goes a long way for me anyway, to be able to kind of tap into what's going on in the communities, and what people are upset about, or what people are encouraged by, or what people are terrified by, or what they what they find that I'm thinking about that they find absolutely uninteresting. So all of
yeah.
those things are actually really helpful.
I'm going to dive right into a reader question. Barbara wrote, I think it's right on topic. Can you address the fear I have as an admittedly thin skinned writer to write something that runs the risk of getting truly heated, even pilot response results? I know you've written a lot about having fearlessness. How
Yeah.
do you get that fearlessness
Yeah.
in this
Well,
climate?
part of it is repetition. I mean, I
Hmm.
think I think I learned it probably on oh goodness, on Twitter. I mean, by the end with Twitter, I mean, I had about 330,000 followers, and it was very engaged. And I've had cases of getting like millions of views on individual. In those days, when there was a Twitter and it was tweets, where it was a ton of discourse, and a lot of it was abuse and hostile and so on. And that reached a limit for me in terms of that hellscape, but which led me for multiple reasons to exit it. But I think it's so important to be willing to share your ideas, to push your ideas out, and understand you're going to get a whole range of responses to it. But I think when you do it, if you feel that you're being honest about it, then I think you just have to live with whatever the reaction may be.
Yeah, every time you put something out there on the internet, you'll get a troll response. It doesn't even have to be controversial. The things
Yeah,
that people have gotten mad at me about are like the most inconsequential things. And like every time you do it, it gets a little easier to let it roll off your back and just be like,
yeah.
I can't worry about every person's reaction, you know?
You can, and by the way, I mean, just to be, transparent about it. I mean, it's not even it's like that the Nazis and right wing abusers and so on, that's where it all comes from. I mean, there was one time on Blue Sky where I posted something, questioning Kamala Harris after the election, and I mean, there was like a firestorm of people on the left who were furious at me for daring to criticize her. So it's not like it's one side or the other. I mean, you do put yourself at risk by saying what you think. But look, I think these are times where we do need courageous people, and we do need honesty, and we do need people to say what they're really thinking and what they're really feeling. And when you do that, I think you find that people will respond. People will appreciate that you're putting yourself out there. So I mean, I don't think there's an easy answer to getting a tough skin, but I think repetition in some ways treats you teaches you that you have to just not get caught up in every response.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Amy points out there's a lot of different considerations for women. There's a lot of hostility aimed at women on the internet,
Right.
and you have to build that skin, but also like you have to know when to protect yourself. Someone else
Yeah,
said like you don't always have to read the comments. If there's a day where you're not ready for the comments, like don't read them, you
that's
know?
so true.
Yeah. Um, someone asked, Beth asked, I've started a small Substack and I get a fair number of looks, but how to increase engagement? I'd love to hear a little bit about how you built this huge community. I know you had a lot from Twitter, as you mentioned before you went in.
Yeah.
Has it happened pretty organically for you, or do you like work every day to figure out how to build your audience?
Well, I do think about it every day. I'm probably compulsive about it. I mean, building does take real attention, and I pay attention to the metrics, constantly. I do, whether it's on an individual piece or for that matter, a note that I put on the notes part of Substack, or just looking at overall numbers. So I've done that from the beginning. I mean, I'm one of those lucky people that I was offered a Substack Pro deal at the beginning. So that was
Hmm.
they agreed. They had reached out to me, and they reached out to me because I did already have a really significant following on at that point on Twitter. And they actually reached out to me the month after the insurrection, and the month of the insurrection. So that's January of 2021. I mean, I had 60 million impressions that month on Twitter, and at about 10%
Wow.
engagement rate. So it was crazy, crazy. And I think the people at Substack, they may have been following me, but they were also crunching the numbers and thought, if I can convert a percentage of those people over from Twitter to Substack, then it would be a thing. And that was true, and it was true for a while, at least until Elon Musk showed up and broke the links to Substack and so forth, so that
Hmm.
certain point, that was no longer an easy way to build audience. And so it's become more organic since then. Over these years, Substack, I think the ecosystem of it has really grown dramatically. It's both better. I think the range of people who are participating, both as writers and as readers, has grown substantially. And I'll say one of the things that, as much as anything, that I've gotten so many subscriptions from is people who recommend me. So, and I have a number of very high profile people who do recommend me. And so, and I recommend them. And, and it's a mutual admiration society. If you follow Mary Trump, you're probably interested in following me. If you follow Heather Cox Richardson, you might be interested in following me. If you follow, Joyce Vance, you might be interested in following
Yeah,
me. So, so I think there's some of that kind of interchange that wasn't so true at the beginning and has become a meaningful thing. But
yeah.
more than anything, I have to say, the the growth happens because you build a habit with readers and you do it consistently. So I publish Monday morning, Friday morning, Saturday morning, every week. I never miss. In 4 years, I've never missed one of those days. I
Wow.
honestly haven't. I mean, I've published over 700 essays. I've never missed a single time, and I've done it because it's building a habit with readers. And as the world has accelerated and gone more crazy, it's required, in my view, to publish more than that. So sometimes I'll throw something else in, maybe even 2 times during the week. And I'm doing more Substack Lives, and I do a recorded conversation, media criticism. And so, I'll do some other things, but Monday, Friday, Saturday, I never miss.
That's
And
incredible that you've never missed one. That's
yeah,
amazing.
well,
Yeah.
not losing your mind. I mean, that's, it's the pact that I make with myself, and it's a pact that I make with the readers. And
Yeah.
you know
Um,
and
just
I think that's a crucial thing. There's If I can just say one other thing there, if you have a very high profile person, a lot of people would start subscribing to some celebrity, and then they found out they were posting like a couple of times a month or something, and quickly realized that the value of what they were providing was super limited.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say, just to build on what you were saying about the powerful recommendation engine in Substack, is the number one thing Substack says you can do to build your audience is these kind of partnerships, what we're doing
Yeah,
right now, introducing our readers to you, introducing your readers to us. If there's a
100%.
Substack you love that is similar to yours, do a Substack live with them, do cross post their material, ask them to cross post yours, because people who are on Substack want to follow other Substacks. It's the most natural audience.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
really
What
important. Really important to do that, and that's outreach. That's just making an effort to connect with people.
Yeah. Um, Claudine asked, I feel like the $64,000 question, which is how do you get past your own bubble, social media and otherwise, and reach people who support the other side? Have you ever had any work that you feel like has broken through to folks who don't agree with you?
It's funny. I made a decision, that I wanted to share what I was thinking, what I was feeling, and I needed to do that as vividly as I could. And I mean, it's a question that I get fairly often, and I would say, I mean, I try to make my writing inclusive. I do, but I think we're living in a binary moment. I do think that I'm not. I don't think I'm in the position to convince Trump cultists why they should reject their man. I think that all I can do is to try to, as clearly as I can, describe what's happening, and hope that over time, people begin to experience more frustration and to decide to open their minds to other points of view. But I think part of the reason we're in this problem is because the choir, is speaking to the choir, singing to the choir. If the choir sang better, if the choir was bigger, you know what, the outcome of the election would have been different. Um,
Yeah.
so, part of the reason why, Kamala Harris didn't win was because, there was a population of Democrats, progressives, who chose to sit it out, or doubted her, or didn't believe that what would happen. So I think there's value for those who choose to try to pull the others in. But right now, I think the challenge is still to make sure that the information ecosystem, even among sort of progressives, is stronger and larger.
Yeah. Circling back to your publishing process, Kay asked why those days, Monday, Friday, Saturday. Is there a science to that or just what you picked and stuck with it?
Yeah, I mean, each of them has their own purpose. I mean, for me, Monday, it can be a chance to sort of reflect on the previous week, but usually it's looking ahead. It's usually thinking ahead to sort of where we are and sort of where we're going. Friday is in some sense a chance to draw on what's happened during the week. I don't necessarily, it's not a summary per se, but it allows me to think about what were the important stories of the week and make a decision of thematically and in terms of what I want to target to sort of look back at the week. Um, and Friday is also a chance to write something that's maybe a little more reflective, a little more philosophical, the kind of thing that maybe you want to read over a weekend.
Mm,
Where people have a little bit more time, they slow down a little bit, so they're open to other kinds of writing. And then Saturday, um, from the beginning has been very particular. It's what I call sort of the Saturday prompt, and I'll write a short essay usually that always sort of leads into a question, and it's really kind of whatever, frankly, happens to have happened in the news or what happens to just be on my mind, with a very specific goal of asking readers to share their own thoughts and feelings and observations, and those have become really popular, and partly because they show kind of how strong and interesting and smart and thoughtful the community is, and it's a chance for people also to rant a little bit sometimes and blow off steam, and and it's a Saturday, so again, people are in a little bit more relaxed state of mind, so they're little more open to doing that sort of thing.
right. That's interesting to hear. One of the things you mentioned in A Time for Moral Clarity, which is one of the pieces we shared ahead of this class, you wrote, we face a daily demand to understand the violations, confront the desecrations, hold firm to our values and principles. Daily demand, that phrase really hits home with
Mm.
me. I think a lot of people have said here, like, how do you decide what to write about? And a lot has been written about the administration's flood the zone strategy. Do so many things that you can't even keep track of them.
Overwhelming, yeah.
Say, do terrible things, but say things that don't even matter, but might get people angry. Like, how do you, when you're thinking about those 3 posts a week, how do you think about what's the thing I have to chime in on, and what's the thing that, like, oh, that irked me, but like, I'm not going to take the bait. I'm not going to write about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a really good question, and and it does every time I'm choosing. I mean, we're in this accelerated time. Of course, there's been a ton to write about, all these years, and it does get trickier to decide, which violation, which desecration, which degradation, which horror. Or which sort of speech of optimism, or voice that's sort of worth targeting feels right. And I have to say, I rely to a large extent on intuition. I mean, I think that people, if they're looking for straight news, there's lots of other places that they can go. They don't need to read me. They don't need to look at America, America. I'm curating. I'm making a decision of where I want to target my attention, where I want to put the spotlight. But I want to make sure that I have some point of view that's worth paying attention to, which means that it's enough of my own point of view that that readers will feel like they're getting something on America, America that they won't get somewhere else. And so for me, sometimes it's this last week it's tariffs. So this last days it's been tariffs. So it was important for me to write about how insane this whole thing is. I wasn't doing a piece on the policy of tariffs per se, but the piece ended up be calling the demolition of a welcoming world, and the image that went with the piece was from Alice in Wonderland, and about America's Mad Hatter who's blowing up the American and world economy. So with all of these, I mean, sometimes I tap into, like, what am I really angry about? Like, okay, that's what I should write about. Or, I saw this photograph from the El Salvador prison of those, people have been placed into this prison without due process and who's had their heads shaved, and then now when they're in this extreme abusive, what Timothy Snyder has called a foreign gulag, and there is, standing in front of them is Christy Nome, proudly talking about what they've done. And you know, I I went back and I did a lot of the research around it, but essentially the photograph is what motivated me to write the piece. So it's hard to say where the choices come from, because they come from many places. But I think it's always important to make sure you actually think you have something to say, and you have something to say that's strong, and that can be instructive for readers.
Yeah, yeah. Getting a little further into the headline of this chat, this seminar, like, how do you do this every day? Think about these issues that are bothering you every day and stay sane. Are there any small or big things that you purposely do to kind of preserve your own wellness and sanity while staying engaged?
Yeah, I would say that my family, my wife and daughters might question whether I have in fact maintained my sanity. I mean, there are days, I mean, where I have heard them say, you're kind of particularly a dark cloud right now, and I say,
Mhm.
like, yeah, are you paying attention? Maybe there's a reason why I'm a dark cloud today. I'd say a couple of things. One is, I think, like many people, I've been watching less cable news. The repetition of the issues over and over,
Mhm.
both in terms of being either frustrated by the way in which that's being covered, or just the drumbeat of it has a lot that I think can undermine your state of mind. I mean, I try to do things that take me into other places. I mean, it's literally things like going on hikes, and being outside, and binge watching a good drama, a well made comedy, all those kind of things that take you away. But I have to say, I'm maybe a little bit of a freak. I'm really happiest when I'm writing, and
Yeah, yeah.
so and I think, look, in life, I think it's important for everyone to have a sense of purpose. And, along with the horror of this, boy, it's not really hard to feel a sense of purpose. I struggle with the question of, is there more that I can do? Is there something that I'm not doing that I should be doing? What can I do that's going to make a difference? Every time I'm trying to think about what that can be, that can make a difference, whether in the broader terms of the body politic, or whether it's individual readers and what people may be going through, stressing about, or feeling distress over. But in some ways, I the very fact that I have the outlet of doing this writing, really in a weird way, is what does keep me sane, because it makes me feel like I'm at least doing what I can.
One thing you're inspiring me to do is just like, even if you don't have a daily sub blog or newsletter, like, when I'm reading the news, I find it helpful to just jot down what I'm thinking instead of like having that thing where you're arguing with people in the news in your head. Like, even just writing it down, the same way as
Yeah,
if you're like having an argument with a friend or a loved one in your head. Like, if you write it down, you feel better. Like, just like write that one sentence down. It gets to you. I think breaking out of cable news habits is a great tip. One small thing I did this year is I
yeah.
ordered a New York Times print subscription for the first time in like 10 years. I'm gonna have it right
Mm,
here actually. It's weird to
yeah.
have that ink on my hands again,
How much
but
do you
like,
read it? Tell the truth. How much do you read it?
this Today's has not been opened, but like,
Yeah,
I try to make a practice of, if I find myself reaching for my phone to check the news, as many times a day as I can, reach and read a column in the paper instead. Because I feel like, even when I'm not on social, when I'm going to the New York Times app, I'm checking news. I'm not like, when I read it in print, I'm learning and I'm processing and I'm taking it in more, and I
yeah,
can slow down and think about it, as opposed to like all day long being like check, 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 check. And it's like you feel like you're doing something, but it's actually like, I'm not helping anyone by
yeah,
checking the New York Times 25 times a day. And like, for me, it actually like, it takes back a little bit of my power from
Yeah,
Trump and everyone else, where it's like you're controlling me all day long and making me angry all day long. It's like I can be angry about it just a few times a day. Personally, I think it helps to like have those kind of boundaries.
I think it
Um,
helps. I saw that somebody asked the question of how do you assess or measure making a difference. That's a tricky thing. You know,
mm,
one of the the benefits of Substack, which has really good metrics, is that I can see the engagement with every piece. So
mhm,
I see, I see both the sort of basic numbers, what taps into people's feelings, and so there's that side of it. I see it in terms of comments. So a lot of the exchange that happens with that, I know it makes a difference. Whether they're responding to me directly and saying like, "Oh, thank you so much for that piece you just wrote. It really helped me today. I really needed that today." And I honestly get a lot of that kind of response, which, it doesn't lead me to pat myself in the back as much as feel grateful that it's helpful to people. So I get that on an individual basis. And then in the larger way, I mean, I can only sort of see that there's again, kind of a growing conversation within the community. So on individual pieces where I'm more or less, especially on Saturday prompts, I'm just sort of setting up the conversation, and then I see really rich dialogue and conversation between readers in a way that that makes me feel like I'm just the host of this thing, and allowing other people to have their own time with each other. So that I think is, in this time, making a difference in part is building community. I think one of the challenges that so many people feel is they feel the divisiveness, and they feel a lot of the anger and the bitterness and hostility and the hate, all of that. And if they feel very much alone in that, that's terrible. And so, to some extent, the building of a community, and that's happened for me gradually over time, bit by bit as the numbers have grown, the community has grown, and the engagement, and I should say specifically since the election, the engagement has been very, very strong, and it just, it tells me. Not that I'm doing something dramatically different. It just tells me that people really need that community, and so at whatever level with each of you, at whatever level your own work has a community, build it. I mean, take that as a really valuable contribution as people are trying to live in the world and make sense of it and deal with it.
you have a really positive community too, which I think a lot of us coming from Twitter are shocked by because everyone, whether they're on your side or not, it's just so toxic, and it always
Mm,
was, and it's draining. And I think some people have found on Substack there's often um, a more positive, uplifting community that people want to be a part of rather than find other people to shut down. When you do those prompts and those posts, are you thinking about how you can kind of foster a sense of hope and positivity, and how do you do that?
Well, I mean, I think with everything that I write, I mean, even in the darkest pieces, I usually try to find a way. If you could probably read the last paragraph or two of most everything that I write, and I'm usually looking for a way to look forward or to look back or to look up in some way that gives people some sense of optimism. You
Yeah.
know, not to get stuck in this worst moment and think that's the end of it. It's not the end of it. There's a way forward. It may take longer than we want, but there's a way to get here. That's the effort. So I'm always sort of looking for some way, and it has to be rooted in factual reality. It has to be true. It can't just be Pollyannish and fabricated. So I mean, I try to do that. In terms of the Saturdays, I mean, it's one of the things that I do, and those are ones that are open for everybody. Anybody can comment on those. And look, I do make a very specific note, which is that you know, you know, uh, respectful remarks are required, and if you're not, trolling, will not be tolerated. I'm very clear about that. And so, early on, I used to get more of that kind of trolling, people who just came on to pick fights and to abuse and all of that. And those people, I mean, I've had to ban those people, because that's not what we're doing, at least in terms of my community. I want people to feel that they can be open and feel that it's a safe enough space to be able to share their thoughts.
Yeah. What is your writing practice? Are you a roll out of bed, read the news, and start writing? Is there a time of day you write? How do you get going on each of your columns?
Well, again, each each of the days. I mean, I write Sunday evening for Monday morning. I write Thursday evening for Friday morning. So it's about 4 p.m. or something that I usually break from whatever else I'm doing, and I turn my head to it. And sometimes I've done a lot of research that precedes it, and sometimes I'll sit down and I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to write. I just don't. And those days are both nerve wracking, because I know I've got to get a piece. And on the other hand, sometimes they can be quite magical, where I just sort of pull a rabbit out of my hat. I find a topic to write about, and usually, I mean, if I start at 4, I'm essentially always done by 6:30 or 7. I mean, I give myself basically a 3-hour window. And it seems that the sweet spot for my pieces, for those, is usually about 1,100 words. Somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 words. I mean, I sit down to write and think like, oh, I'm just going to write 500, and 1,100 words show up. That feels like the right length. That it's not overwhelming for a reader, but it's also you know it's substantial enough that it's worth people's time to read it. And then Saturday mornings, those are different. I mean, I usually have the question in mind before I go to bed. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm rifling through my head like 20 different possible questions, because each of them is always a question. What's the question? And then I'll just sit down, and in some cases they take research, but I get up really early in the morning, and I get an espresso, and I sit and write the thing. And those are usually short. Those might be 500 words, 600 words, usually at the most. Occasionally longer if it's really like I need to detail something that happened.
Yeah. Jamie asked something I was wondering too. Does anyone read your posts before you publish?
Well, there is one person. From the beginning, I've gone through a few different people, but for the last few years, I have a copy editor. His name is Kenneth Dillon. He's really smart and good copy editor. And he doesn't read every time that I publish, but I usually, especially if it's one that I'm a little uncertain about, I'm really happy that he does. Especially since I'm writing these things, and I'm writing fast. And in the old days, I would finish a piece of writing, I'd go to bed, I'd wake up in the morning, I'd read it again and do another draft before it would go forward to an editor. So I had time to digest and double check and rethink and do all this. With this, I write, and hours later it's out there, and so it's a little nerve wracking. Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? I mean, did I miss something huge? Am I crazy? I mean, what did I do? And so I do have somebody who will do kind of a quick copy edit and make sure I didn't do anything too stupid.
Yeah. And then are you like, do you do a lot of rewriting on your own work in those 2.5, 3 hours? Or are you kind of a first draft? That's what we get.
I'm pretty much a first draft person.
Yeah.
I mean, but before I say like I'm done, I'll usually go back and read it one more time if I can. Not always. And so for me, I'm kind of funny. If I can figure out how to start, then I don't have a problem. I mean, if I can figure out, usually I like to have a title to begin. If I have to come up with the title later, that's usually a problem. I like to have a title because it sort of sets me in terms of a theme. And so that's important. And then where do I start? How do I begin? if I got that right, I usually have an idea of what are the elements, the sections that I want each of the pieces to have. So I know, I have kind of I don't outline exactly, but I will have maybe 3 or 4 or 5 bullet points that I've either written down or that are in my head that are either different, you know, snippets of information that I know that I want to include, or just sort of topics that I know are subtopics that belong in the piece. And if I get it started, I can just pretty much write it straight through.
I think starting with a headline before you get too far in is a really good advice. That's even something we follow at Narratively Stories. I feel like if you can't put a headline on your piece and tell us in a sentence what the main idea of it is, if it's like, well, it's hard to say because it's a little about this, a little about that, there might be really worthy things in there, but it's really going to be really hard to shape it into a piece that you can then convince people to read.
Yeah,
So I think that's true for all writing.
yeah. I mean, it's sort of like the pitch to myself, right? I mean, it's sort of saying, this is what this is going to be about, and okay, now do that. I'm pitching to myself that I can take that thought and make it real.
Yeah. A few minutes ago, you were talking about a little bit about writer's block, and some days you don't know what you're going to write about. Seamus asked at that point, "Do you ever use Chat GPT for ideas?" Very timely. No.
Nope. Maybe I'm old fashioned about that. It's a little bit of like an ethical standard with me. It's like I got to do my work, and it's like, excuse me. It's like I understand people who use it as a kind of a brainstorming tool. I get that, but I feel like I have a lot of discourse with lots of different media and lots of different people, and so I'm the one who has to sort of curate. I'm the one who has to kind of go through all that and figure out what's the thing that's worth paying attention to, and so that's sort of my that's I treat it as that's my responsibility to do.
Yeah. In one of the other pieces that we shared before the class, which was called "What Trump Can't Do," you wrote, "Making change requires rejecting a sense of powerlessness and recognizing our collective power and possibility." A lot of people have chimed in about that. I mean, I'm wondering, as I said at the beginning, a lot of us have felt really powerless recently, more than recently. I don't know. I'm sensing like maybe it's shifting a little bit in the past week. Are you sensing that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, look, I mean, I do think the hands-off protests were important. Millions of people showed up all over the country. Small towns, large cities, all of that, and the numbers were more than people expected. I think that's important. I think we're just at the beginning of that for people to
Hmm.
begin to grasp what their collective power is. I'm taking very seriously this idea from Erica Chenoweth, who's a political scientist at Harvard, who said, she's done research that political movements have usually taken about 3.5% of a population to be able to, concretely define a set of goals and then begin to use the street demonstrations to motivate those in power to respond. And in the American context, 3.5% is 12 million people. So that hasn't happened yet. But I think that rather than simply waiting for dare I say, Chuck Schumer to show up, or pick an elected official. And there's been a lot of really fantastic people. I think about Chris Murphy and J.B. Pritzker and Jamie Raskin and a number of others who've been Jasmine Crockett, and there's been quite a number of people who have shown up. But I think the idea that we just sort of sit and wait for them to solve this is not the way forward. And so people are feeling disheartened, discouraged, distressed. Part of it is to be involved in a community, and whether it's one of these mass demonstrations, or taking part in an advocacy group, or working in your own community or with your neighbors, or in whatever ways you can help to engage and help people who are struggling, whether it's yourself, your neighbors, your family, or whether it's undocumented workers who are in grave danger. Whatever might be the approach that you take to to engage. All of those things are part of recognizing that we do have power to affect the outcome of all of this. And I think that's become more important. And that piece, it was called "What Trump Can't Do," and it was to try to remind people that with all of these efforts, these unconstitutional efforts to ignore sort of rule of law and ignore the responsibility that a president should have to be a leader of the Justice Department and so forth, it becomes important for each of us to recognize the things that he can't touch. He can't take away our anger, and he can't take away our belief in democracy, and he, can't take away our right to read and to write and to share what we think, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, I needed to write that piece because I needed to remind myself at a point where I was feeling like, oh, it's like, all the things that I believe in are being put in danger.
Yeah. What what do you think are some maybe small things that people can do, especially if you're a writer and you want to use those writing skills? Like maybe you're not a writer who has 100,000 followers like Stephen does. What can you do to kind of get past that feeling of powerlessness?
Well, I mean, look, you have to write.
Hmm.
You have to write. And there's no rule about this, right? I mean, I've set up sort of when I write, and then I write, beyond that I break my rules and I write more often than that because I feel like, oh, this happened on Wednesday, I can't wait until Friday or Saturday, I need to say something now. And I hope that when I do that, it's good for the readers. But you know what, I do it because it's good for me too, because I need to express myself, I need to say what's on my mind, I need to share what I'm thinking. And so I think it's really important for everyone here. I mean, look, you write because I hope because you have something on your mind, you have something to say, you have something that you want to share, and it's important that you do. And there's no rule on how long it has to be, or for that matter, how short it can be. I mean, sharing something really short that's meaningful, I mean, can be of an enormous value. So I just think that I mean, I don't understand the idea of writer's block, because I think you just, if you're a professional writer, which my living has always depended upon writing, so I felt like I never had the freedom in some sense to have writer's block. I just had to find a way to keep pushing forward. But I think, and that's helped me in terms of the discipline that I have to be able to work. But I think the thing is for everybody, whether you're writing about this moment in terms of politics, or you're writing about art or music, or something that captures sort of the beauty of the world. My God, that's an act of opposition at this moment. That's as important as sort of more direct kind of political writing. So, I found even lately that I wrote a Saturday prompt on what paintings touch you most deeply, and my God, people were grateful that for a day that we were focusing on beautiful works of art rather than the latest horror show.
That's a wonderful thing to hear. Kind of like getting out of your lane a little bit can
Yeah,
sometimes be invigorating.
yeah,
Yeah, I know in your first the piece we shared at Time for Moral Clarity, you mentioned your very first essay 4 years ago on Substack, and in that piece you talked about how you used to be kind of hesitant to express your opinions. Kind of
yeah.
felt like you were a classically trained journalist, like you just tell it straight.
Aaron,
Um, and then you talk a little bit about like what inspired you to kind of use this platform, Substack, to really speak out honestly and fearlessly. Speaking out honestly and fearlessly resonates and is a little more haunting now than it was 4 years ago, with protesters being detained and media companies capitulating to government threats. But a lot. Someone asked earlier, but a lot of people have been asking for the chat, so I just wanted to circle back a little bit to this question of fearlessness. Like, are you as fearless as you were 4 years ago? Are there times where you like quiver before hitting that send button and worry about what the repercussions are going to be?
no. I mean,
Okay.
no, I don't quiver. I mean, I just do it. And look, I'd be a a fool if I said that I'm not aware that free speech is under attack. And it's one day it's a pro-Palestinian protester who's being kidnapped and sent off to a detention center in Louisiana, or somebody else who happens to have a tattoo who's sent off to the gulag in El Salvador. I mean, it's one small step from that to arresting, kidnapping, deporting, other American citizens, who are in some ways opposed to the interests of this regime. I mean, I think that's a real legitimate fear. I mean, I would be dishonest if I said I haven't had a conversation with a handful of lawyers. Should I hit the point where I'm now under attack from those who are looking to silence. But so do I worry about it? You have to worry about it. It's a real thing. Has it caused me to soft pedal what I'm saying? No. I mean, this is our country. This is my country. This is our democracy, and we have to do what we can to keep it. I'm interested in doing what I can to help sustain the survival of our democratic country. And I mean, I just this is a moment where I can't turn away from that. I just think it's my, honestly, like I said at the beginning, I feel like it's my duty as an American.
I appreciate you all of that. Appreciate you being transparent about seeking legal advice. And I'm betting a lot of people are saying like, well, I don't have the means to do that. So one thing I just wanted to call out: Substack recently launched a program called Defender,
Yeah,
which
legal
can
defender.
yeah, Legal Defender can support journalists, independent storytellers with defense against unreasonable legal threats.
I've
I,
spoken to them. Yes, I have.
Great, that's
Yeah,
good to know.
no,
And you don't
no,
have to
there.
have 100,000 followers to get their attention, as I understand it. Like anyone can speak to them.
Yeah, that's
I'm
right.
not sure. I think they said that you don't even have to be on Substack.
Hmm.
I'm not positive about that, but check it out, Substack Legal Defender. Even if you're just like thinking about writing and having that fearless, that sense of like, how do I even get into this all? Or if someone has sent you an unreasonable threat, I think it's something to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you to everyone for all these comments coming in. I'm sorry that we haven't been able to get to all of them. There's over 1,000 people on the call now, which is amazing to see. I think kind of Stephen, any last words or anything you want to make sure to hit on in terms of how to stay sane and stay focused on writing about politics in this complicated time?
Yeah, I mean, look, again, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Obviously, the strategy has been to flood the zone, and to feel not only overwhelmed but feel a sense of like there's nothing I can do, and to sort of give in to doubt and despair. I just think it's really important in this time to sort of not frankly not let them win. I mean, to stand up against that and understand that it's our constitutional right to write and to read what we want and to say what we think, and we can't give that up. And in terms of the everyday work, I mean, if it feels overwhelming, I mean, I say that this to my NYU students in my long form narrative class. Don't think about you have a 4,000 word piece and be overwhelmed by the scale of it. Remember, it's made up of pieces. So, there's little sub chapters that are part of it. So do them one at a time. If you feel like you're overwhelmed by, 20 different topics, then pick one. I think the effort is never to do everything in any given piece. Pick that little piece of the idea or the topic that you can engage with and that you can share your thoughts on, and write that and share
Yes,
that. And then you can
yes.
do it again. You can come back another day and do another piece or another topic or another slice of it. So, find a way not to feel overwhelmed, but to find a way to make your world and your choices as a writer manageable.
I love that so much. Someone earlier in the chat actually said, pick one thing, go for it. And I think that's, don't let the forest be kind of the enemy of the trees, right? To mix
Yeah,
too many metaphors.
Yeah,
Um,
and like I said, sometimes I mean, I'll write about a photograph, because like that conveys so much to me. I mean, I'll tell you, I shouldn't say because I haven't written this yet, but I've been thinking about the idea of writing a piece. I was in Chicago and I was thinking about Graham Wood's American Gothic, the painting, and I'm planning to write a piece about that in terms of American identity, and that was published in 1930, and this is 95 years later. What was the world then? What is the world now? I mean, there's a lot of ways that I can end up writing something, but the point is that single painting or a photograph or a speech or a something can sometimes be fantastic jumping off points for whatever it is that you want to think about and write about.
Wonderful. I think that's a good place to end it. I love seeing all these folks chime in the comments from all over the world. It's really amazing. If you don't already, please follow Stephen at America America on Substack. Follow Narratively at Narratively on Substack.
Please,
We've got free
please do.
subscriptions, paid subscriptions. For those of you who are new to Narrative Academy, this free seminar is sort of our like big lecture hall guest speaker version of a class, and we're really excited to have this open free to everyone. We do also have much smaller hands-on workshop classes. We've got upcoming classes about everything from memoir writing to breaking into speech writing to applying for writing grants, writing about social issues. If anyone's interested, hop over to narratively.com, check out our classes. You can always email me, Brendan at narratively.com. And I just feel really inspired, and I'm really, really grateful having you here today, Stephen. And everyone, remember, take it piece by piece, moment by moment, day by day.
Yeah, and look, you're all are here. The fact that you chose to be a part of this, this is a community, and let's keep building it. Be involved, stay engaged, share your thoughts, share your feelings. Do all those things. It makes a difference.
It makes a difference. Yeah. Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone, for being here. We
Thanks
will
so much.
post a recording of this for folks who are asking if you missed any part of it. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
And repeating my email, it's Brendan, Brendan, at narratively.com. Someone asked for that. All right. See everybody soon.
See you next time.